Vouchsafe it so, said heaven's ambassador, and deign it quickly. By all means abhor to incense Jove's wrath against thee, that with grace he may hereafter all thy wish embrace. Thus took the Argus-killing god his wings, and since the reverend nymph these awful things received from Jove, she to Ulysses went, whom she found ashore, drowned in discontent. His eyes kept never dry, he did so mourn and waste his dear age for his wished return, which still without the cause he used to do, because he could not please the goddess so. At night yet forced, together took their rest, the willing goddess and the unwilling guest. But he all day in rocks and on the shore the vexed sea viewed, and did his fate deplore. Him now the goddess, coming near, bespake, Unhappy man, no more discomforts take for my constraint of thee, nor waste thine age. I now will passing freely disengage thy irksome stay here. Come then, fell thee wood and build a ship to save thee from the flood. I'll furnish thee with fresh wave, bread and wine, ruddy and sweet, that will the piner pine. Put garments on thee, give thee winds foreright, that every way thy home-bent appetite may safe attain to it. And if so it please, at all parts, all the heaven-housed deities, that more in power are, more in skill than I, and more can judge what fits humanity. He stood amazed at this strange change in her, and said, O goddess, thy intents prefer some other project than my parting hence, commanding things of too high consequence for my performance, that myself should build a ship of power, my home essays to shield against the great sea of such dread to pass, which not the best built ship that ever was will pass exulting, when such winds as Jove can thunder up their trims and tacklings prove. But could I build one, I would never aboard thy will oppose, nor one, without thy word, given in the great oath of the gods to me, not to beguile me in the least degree. The goddess smiled, held hard his hand, and said, Oh, you are a shrewd one, and so habited in taking heed, thou knowest not what it is to be unwary, nor use words amiss. How hast thou charmed me, were I ne'er so sly? Let earth know then, and heaven so broad, so high, and the under-sunk waves of the infernal stream, which is an oath as terribly supreme as any god swears, that I had no thought, but stood with what I spake, nor would have wrought nor counseled any act against thy good, but over diligently weighed, and stood on these points in persuading thee that I would use myself in such extremity. For my mind simple is and innocent, not given by cruel sleights to circumvent, nor bear I in my breast a heart of steel, but with the sufferer willing sufferance feel. This said, the grace of goddesses led home, he tracked her steps, and to the cavern come in that rich throne where Mercury arose he sat. The nymph herself did then oppose, for food and beverage, to him all best meat and drink that mortals use to taste and eat. Then sat she opposite, and for her feast was nectar and ambrosia addressed by handmaids to her. Both what was prepared did freely fall to. Having fitly fared, the nymph Calypso this discourse began. Jove bred Ulysses, many-witted man, still is thy home so wished, so soon away. Be still of cheer, for all the worst I say. But if thy soul knew what a sum of woes for thee to cast up, thy stern fates impose, ere to thy country earth thy hopes attain, undoubtedly thy choice would here remain, keep house with me, and be a liver ever. Which methinks, should thy house and thee dissever, though for thy wife there thou art set on fire, and all thy days are spent in her desire, and though it be no boast in me to say in form or mind I match her every way, nor can it fit a mortal dame's compare to fecht those terms with us that deathless are. The great in councils made her this reply, renowned, and to be reverenced deity, let it not move thee, that so much I vow my comforts to my wife, Though well I know all cause myself why wise Penelope in wit is far inferior to thee, in feature, stature, all the parts of show, she being immortal, and immortal thou. Old, ever growing, and yet never old. Yet her desires shall all my days see told, adding the sight of my returning day and natural home. If any god shall lay his hand upon me as I pass the seas, I'll bear the worst of what his hand shall please. And having given me such a mind as shall the more still rise, the more his hands lets fall. In wars and waves my suffering were not small. I now have suffered much as much before, hereafter let as much result and more. This said, the sun set, and earth shadows gave. When these two, in an inn-room of the cave left to themselves, left love no rites undone, the early morn, up he rose, put on his in-and-out weed, she herself, and chases amidst a white robe, full of all the graces, ample and pleated thick with like fishy scales, a golden girdle then her waist impales, her head a veil decks, and abroad they come, and now began Ulysses to go home. A great axe first she gave, the 2 ways cut, in which a fair well-polished helm was put, that from an olive bough received his frame, a plainer then. Then led she, till they came to lofty woods that did the isle confine, the fir tree, poplar, and heaven-scaling pine, had there their offspring, of which those that were of driest matter, and grew longest there, he choosed for lighter sail. This place thus shown, the nymph turned home. He fell to felling down, and 20 trees he stooped in little space, planed, used his plumb, did all with artful grace. In meantime did Calypso wimbles bring. He bored, closed, nailed, and ordered everything, and took how much a shipwright will allow a ship of burden, one that best doth know what fits his art. So large a keel he cast, wrought up her decks, and hatches sideboards mast. With willows, watlings armed her to resist the billows' outrage. At it all she missed, sail yards and stern for guide. The nymph then brought linen for sails, which with dispatch he wrought, gables and halsters, tacklings, all the frame in 4 days' space to full perfection came. The 5th day they dismissed him from the shore, weeds neat and odorous gave him victuals store, wine and strong waters, and a prosperous wind, to which Ulysses, fit to be divine, his sails exposed and hoised. Off he gat, and cheerful was he. At the stern he sat, and steered right artfully, nor sleep could seize his eyelids. He beheld the Pleiades, the bear, surnamed the Wain, that round doth move about Orion, and keeps still above the billowy ocean. The slow setting star, Boötes called, by some the wagoner. Calypso warned him his course should steer still to his left hand. 17 days did clear the cloudy night's command in his moist way, and by the 18th light he might display the shady hills of the Phaeacian shore, for which, as to his next abode, he bore. The country did a pretty figure yield, and looked from off the dark seas like a shield. Imperious Neptune, making his retreat from the Ethiopian earth, and taking seat upon the mountains of the Solymi, from thence, far off discovering, did descry Ulysses his fields ploughing, all on fire. The sight straight set his heart, and made desire of wreak run over. It did boil so high. When his head nodding, "O impiety," he cried out, "now the gods' inconstancy is most apparent, altering their design, since I the Ethiops saw, and here confines to this Ulysses' fate his misery. The great mark on which all his hopes rely lies in Phaeacia, but I hope he shall feel woe at height ere that dead calm befall." This said, he, begging, gathered clouds from land, frighted the seas up, snatched into his hand his horrid trident, and aloft did toss of all the winds. All storms he could engross, all earth took into sea with clouds. Grim night fell tumbling headlong from the cope of light. The east and south winds justled in the air, the violent zephyr and north making fair rolled up the waves before them. And then bent Ulysses' knees, and all his spirit was spent, in which despair he thus spake, "Woe is me! What was I born to, man of misery? Fear tells me now that all the goddess said, truth's self will author, that fate would be paid, grief's whole sum due for me at sea before I reached the dear touch of my country shore. With what clouds Jove's heaven's heightened forehead binds, how tyrannized the wreaths of all the winds, how all the tops he bottoms with the deeps, and in the bottoms all the tops he steeps. Thus dreadful is the presence of our death. Thrice 4 times blessed were they that sunk beneath their fates at Troy, and did to naught contend, but to renowned Atrides with their end. I would to God my hour of death and fate that day had held the power to terminate, when showers of darts my life bore undepressed about divine Aeacides deceased. Then had I been allotted to have died, by all the Greeks with funerals glorified, whence death, encouraging good life, had grown, where now I die, by no man mourned nor known. This spoke, a huge wave took him by the head and hurled him overboard. Ship and all it laid inverted quite amidst the waves, but he far off from her sprawled, strode about the sea, his stern still holding broken off, his mast burst in the middle. So horrible a blast of mixed wind struck it. Sails and sail yards fell amongst the billows, and himself did dwell a long time under water, nor could get in haste his head out. Wave with wave so met in his depression, and his garments too, given by Calypso, gave him much to do, hindering his swimming. Yet he left not so his drenched vessel for the overflow of her nor him, but gat at length again, wrestling with Neptune, hold of her, and then sat in her bulk, insulting over death, which with the salt stream pressed to stop his breath he scaped, and gave the sea again to give to other men. His ship so strived to live, floating at random, cuffed from wave to wave, as you have seen the north wind when he drave in autumn heaps of thorn-fed grasshoppers. Hither and thither, one heap this way bears, another that, and makes them often meet in his confused gales. So Ulysses' fleet the winds hurled up and down. Now Boreas tossed it to Notus. Notus gave it past to Eurus. Eurus Zephyr made it pursue that horrid Tennis. This sport called the view of Cadmus' daughter, which the narrow heel, I know Leucothea, that first did feel immortal dames' desires, and had a tongue, but now had the honor to be named among the marine godheads. She with pity saw Ulysses justled thus from flaw to flaw, and like a cormorant in form and flight, rose from the whirlpool, on a ship did light, and thus bespake him, Why is Neptune thus in thy pursuit extremely furious, overpressing thee with such a world of ill, even to thy death? He must not serve his will, though 'tis his study. Let me then advise as my thoughts swerve. Thou shalt not be unwise to leave thy weeds and ships to the commands of these rude winds, and work out with thy hands past to Phaeacia, where thy austere fate is to pursue thee with no more hate. Take here this tablet, and with this ribbon strung, and see it still about thy bosom hung, by whose eternal virtue never fear to suffer thus again, nor perish here. But when thou touchest with thy hand the shore, then take it from thy neck, nor wear it more, and cast it far off from the continent, and thus thy person far ashore present.